A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon, mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight, otherwise mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73, partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Thank you for letting us be of service to you through the magic of YouTube and Rumble and, of course, wherever you are jumping into the fray with us. Joe Thomas in the morning, brought to you by Pyramid Paving here in the Pyramid Paving Studios. Lots and lots going on since last we sat down and did this. We're going to talk privacy today. I was doing some math, and maybe you can correct me with this, but just at a 5-mile stare, 40% of the Bill of Rights has to do with privacy in some way, shape, or form. Because if you look at the First Amendment, and you could make an argument the Second Amendment as well. So, I mean, easily 50% of the Bill of Rights is dedicated to privacy. Why did the Founding Fathers, especially George Mason and those guys, that insisted that the Bill of Rights be put into the U.S. Constitution, never minding having written it into the Virginia Constitution? Why was privacy such a big deal? And why is it such a big deal today? We're going to visit with Brian Hawkins, who has brought a privacy argument in front of the Supreme Court. And then we're also going to get into the Albemarle County budget. They've got some more public hearings coming up, 629. They're approaching $750 million. And if you add Charlottesville City's just slightly more than $250 million, that just for one county and the city in the middle of it, that's $1 billion in spending. And what have you got for it? We sit around and we wait for some professor at UVA to say, hey, can somebody do my dry cleaning for me? Also, the General Assembly back for the veto considerations. The General Assembly will convene and try to overturn. It's interesting how people out on the interwebs seem to think that 51-49 is sufficient to override a gubernatorial veto. No, kids, 3/4. I think it's 3/4 or 2/3. I think it's 3/4. Have to override the governor's veto. So it's not going to, most of them are not going to be overridden in any way, shape, or form. But also the governor and the Democrats in control of the House and Senate by ostensibly one vote each have come to a meeting of the minds on the state budget. Multiple billions of dollars there, but they are going to sit down. They're going to put aside the backward budget, as Governor Youngkin called it, and all of his tax cuts, which the Democrats said was lunacy. And they're going to start from scratch and hopefully have some biennium together by the end of, they said middle of next month is when they're going to have. Marjorie Taylor Greene in Virginia's 5th Congressional District today, campaigning for John McGuire and his efforts to unseat. Now, this is going to be interesting because does John McGuire go to this campaign event with Marjorie Taylor Greene if the Senate is in session? That's going to be an interesting. We have reached out to John to see if he'll join us for a little while today. More on the Dali. The ship has filed legal paperwork to, as I read it, and my mother would have understood this much better than I do, but it's basically saying, hey, everyone who had a container on this ship owes a little bit to the damages that the shipping company is going to have to face. But brings back the whole issue of were they the subject of a cyber attack, and if they were or weren't, will that be used to continue to push the button of got to have less privacy in order to have security? I mean, we got to have security. You got to give up privacy. I think Franklin was the who said who want freedom and well, I wasn't ready to go into that right there. Also, Standoff in Augusta County settled now, and man is in custody. We'll get you some of the details on that. But I want to begin. Oh, and the Mayorkas trial. The show of hands. How many people were shocked that it was over as quickly as it was? Yeah, I didn't think you were. Wow. It actually made it to the Senate. But there's a story that the Democratic Party is challenging some electoral maps in Georgia over what they say is minority voting strength. Rob Bonta and 18 colleagues have filed a class action suit saying that Georgia's map defranchises minority groups. So you say, well, Joe, why would the California Attorney General be interested in that? Well, there's a reason for that, because the California Attorney General says that if Georgia goes red, they might not get the president that they want. This is the story from Fox, and it goes on to say that Bonta and 18 other blue state attorneys general are now going after this. This is on behalf of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and the African Methodist Episcopal Church and several other Georgia voters that say if their state goes red, which polls indicate that it will, then that disenfranchises black voters. And that their voting blocks, the internal maps in Georgia, are going to mess that up. And you say, well, how does that pencil out, Joe? That's a good question, because internally it shouldn't make a difference what district you're in, because they're not doing an electoral college style allocation of the delegates to the electoral college. So where you vote shouldn't matter writ large to how Georgia's overall vote turnout is, unless the Zuckerbucks people want some really heavily Democrat districts so that they can bury all of their drag out the vote campaigns. You see, this is where the dirty little secret of this comes in. This is why it's such a big deal to the attorneys general in all these blue states, because if Georgia goes red, do we still have our link to 270 we'll do the 270 to win on the other side of the break. But their point being is that they, California and these other 18 blue states, would be disenfranchised if Georgia goes red, and that that the only case they can make is regarding the districts, the electoral maps, the voting precincts, saying, oh, it disenfranchises black voters because why? And their point is, well, it breaks up communities of color. But again, we are talking about a vote that is going to be at large. You're going to vote as a state in Georgia to get to the. You know who would be perfect for this? John Pudner. He's a dear friend of ours, a political consultant, also Fox News contributor. See if Pudner is available. Is he doing Fox TV this morning on this? But he understands Georgia politics as well as he understands Virginia. But this is purely an end around saying, well, we have no real reason to bring this case up, but we're trying to flip Georgia blue. And this may be a way to do it, because you can bury, look at what Zuckerbucks did in 2020. By dragging out the vote in Philadelphia, they figured fewer people would be likely to notice a big Democrat swing in an area that Joe Biden was going to carry anyway. He could have picked somebody as bad as Kamala Harris to be, No, never mind. So the thought being that, well, Philadelphia was going to vote blue anyway, so nobody would notice. Nobody would be the wiser if the Zuckerbucks people went and dragged out a bunch of votes from people who were eligible but unregistered. These were the people that the Eric lists. One of the things that the governor did was to keep us from going back into Eric with his veto pen. But the Eric list gave the Zuckerbucks people a list of eligible but unregistered voters so they could go knock on their door and drag a vote out of them, guilt them. I'm sure that's why all those Amway and Fuller Brush salespeople, nobody's selling Electrolux door to door right now because they've all been hired by the Zuckerbucks people. Go, closers, get coffee. Bring me back some votes. You can see Alec Baldwin now standing there. Closers, coffee is for closes. Running their electoral operations for Mark Zuckerberg. Now there is a Saturday Night Live skit I would actually download. No, I wouldn't watch it live. Sorry, I don't do that. Saturday night's different for it. But so the district map, so the only thing these attorneys general can actually challenge, because these have been drawn, I think in Georgia they did it with a special master, very similar to the way Virginia did, so they get some local church groups and local NAACP to say, oh, these districts, they're not fair. But nobody stops and says to them, hey, what difference does that make? Where's Hillary Clinton when we need her? What difference at this point does it make? Either Donald Trump's going to get the most votes in Georgia or Joe Biden's going to get the most votes in Georgia. Okay, to be fair. Or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. might get the most votes in Georgia. But one of those three is going to get Georgia's electoral votes, no matter what district you live in. But these attorneys general, they want to make the case, and you can weigh in on it as well. California Attorney General Rob Bonta have filed amicus briefs arguing they're diluting minority voting strength. Because, of course, minorities, they just all vote the same as the Democrat Party tells them, right? Peach State's legal battle to keep GOP drawn maps is transparently political. This is the left's playbook for redistricting. This is Chad Ennis, who's been on my radio program before, the vice president of Honest Elections. And tomorrow we're going to visit with Carrie Telesco from the Election Integrity Network at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy on this and more. The ACLU suit contends that the map still violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which says no voting qualification or prerequisite to voting or standard practice or procedure shall be imposed or applied by any state or political subdivision to deny or abridge the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race or color. Seems pretty straightforward. And again, you ask yourself, so what exactly is being denied to these folks? And unfortunately, what you get are judges who don't want to go home and face the music on these kind of things. So these judges will say, I'm just going to say, okay, get out of my courtroom before anyone starts yelling. And that's what they're counting on. That's what Rob Bonta and the rest of these attorneys general are counting on, are some judicial spinelessness that just wants this out of their courtroom before Fani Willis gets a hold of it or assigns one of her underlings, and I do mean underlings, to it. We'll get off this subject to the point. We'll go to 270 to win next.
This is the Racing Wire Minute with Brian Belansky.
F1 in China. That story next.
The Racing Wire Minute is presented by
She can stand, she can do more. Like build a rocket and watch it soar. Clean the oceans and make the world a better place. Oh, she can STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
The hardest part of the F1 season is starting to wind down. The long string of early races that are outside of Europe, known as flyaways. They are a logistical nightmare for teams and a drain on crews. China is this weekend, then Miami in 2 weeks before returning to Europe. Max Verstappen looks poised to continue his winning ways after taking home the big trophy in Japan. Ferrari looks to be the only team that can challenge Red Bull, but so far they have needed Red Bull to have problems to snag a win. It's also a sprint race weekend. That second race could be problematic for teams with limited spare parts at the ready. The sprint race is at 11 p.m. Eastern Friday. The Grand Prix is at 3 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning.
A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon, mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight, otherwise mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73, partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining in with us here. And oh my gosh, so many people. Why weren't we on Rumble before? I mean, sure, it was quite the test of my coding legerdemain to try to jump through all the hoops. But my gosh, so many people, both live right now while we're doing this, and in the spaces in between, in the after hours, are watching the program, downloading the program. If you've never had it before, coming soon back over the air to, at the very least, the radio station. My wife and I are awaiting the FCC approval to own WTON in Stanton, Waynesboro, and Harrisonburg, and Crozet. I'm in the western Albemarle, the 151 corridor. That's right. We may actually have to sit down with the wriggler, or at least his wife, the actual distiller there, with cideries and wineries and whining all over the place. So we'll get coming soon back over the broadcast airs. We're going to keep this going on, I think. As long as we can make it work both with the broadcast and the air, we're going to need some graphic for when we start taking live phone calls. We've found the equipment we need, so for now you can, as the screen tells you over here, you can send your emails to jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com, or you can do the 434-882-4217, and if you do that, just leave a voicemail. Like I said, we're still working on some of the kit to rebuild the live phone call connections. We had some very interesting, some classic names in broadcast equipment are in the game now, and that's a good thing. He's the daddy of the Mackie, let's just say. But in any event, I wanted to get into this Georgian story, the Georgians that are along with the California attorneys general saying, 18 attorneys general from 18 blue states, led by California Attorney General Rob Bonta, filing amicus briefs with the court saying that the Georgian districts, now 3 years in existence, violate the Voting Rights Act. They didn't 2 years ago, but they do now because, and this is the because. Do we have the graphical depiction of what we're talking about here? This is the website 270 to win, and 270 to win is I don't know if they're partisan or not, and I really don't care. They're kind of fun. If you've got 5 or 10 minutes, maybe you're on a conference call, maybe your chief of marketing is droning on, or your human resources director is explaining any number of things that say Trump on them that are now no longer allowed in the office. But you see here on the map, A bunch of states in blue, a bunch of states in red, and that's fairly self-explaining. So right now, the Republican nominee for president has 235 electoral votes by polling alone. The Democratic Party nominee for president, do we have to do that? I know they say it. All right, so Donald Trump has 235 electoral votes, and Joe Biden has 226. You need, as the website would indicate, 270 electoral votes. This is also why, by the way, I generally don't get into all the nationwide polls. Oh, Joe Biden's leading by 3 points. Joe Biden's leading what? It's not how we elect president, regardless of how powerful or important. And part of this is, as we've said before, the blood sport that gets created when we have these elected monarchs and their cabinet staff that is just ready to go out amongst us and eat out our substance, as Thomas Jefferson wrote regarding the deep state of King George III. So anyway, back to 270 to win. You'll see some of the states are gray or beige or tan or whatever color you want to call that, taupe. These are the ones that they aren't saying where they stand, but they do have polling data. So you see here that they have polling data for all these states, and by the states, here is the nationwide. See Joe Biden there nationwide, 6 most recent polls, 0.5 percentage point. But let's go, here's Michigan. Trump is leading by 2 percentage points. So that would be, in most states, considered a very light win. So we're going to give him just a little bit there, and you say, oh my goodness, he's already at 250 electoral votes right there. So let's go on into their polling data. There's Wisconsin. Trump is leading by 1.3. Again, it's a little bit. This was right after Joe Biden was in Wisconsin saying, "I'm going to forgive all of your student loan debt." Now you see, look here, 260 electoral votes, and those are just close ones. But you want to get into the meat and potatoes, the crux of all of this, and that is Georgia. Georgia. Where was there was a Georgian map here a little while ago. Sorry about that. And let's get the most recent Georgia pollings here. The last 6 polls, President Trump is leading by 3.7%. See, this is why the California Attorney General is so interested in flipping. So 3.7% is a pretty good amount. Even the Zuckerbucks. Oh my goodness. Look at that. 276. So even if we were to take Wisconsin off and make Wisconsin slightly blue, and Michigan, that was kind of close too. So let's just play the game here. So Michigan and Wisconsin go blue. But you get Georgia, and then where was Arizona? I saw Arizona up here. Arizona, President Trump is leading by 4 percentage points, so that's a pretty safe bet there. And then it's down to Nevada, where was the polling data for Nevada? I know this is scintillating, isn't it? Watching a guy scroll on the radio. President Trump leading by 3.5 percentage points. Again, pretty safe. That's 268. It comes down to Pennsylvania, President Biden's home state, where we scroll and find that President Biden is leading by 2 percentage points. So again, you say, well, there's the win. There's the 270 for Biden. But then this is where Michigan and Wisconsin are key. Go back to what they were saying about Michigan and Wisconsin. This is why Joe Biden was in Wisconsin, saying that, oh, well, we're going to forgive all of your student loan debt. So Trump is leading by 1.3 percentage points in Wisconsin right now. So that's a little bit red. And he was just over 1 percentage point in Michigan. So even though we said, maybe we'll throw it margin of error, Michigan turns out, but that's 2 percentage points in Michigan. Well, there's 293. So this is where Georgia comes into play, because if you take Georgia out and you can swing either Wisconsin or Michigan or Nevada, you're looking at 270 electoral votes. But that's why all those national polls and all that stuff about Joe Biden's leading by half a percentage point now, Joe. That's not how we choose the president. Now, bigger than issue than that is the lunacy that we create with this elected monarchy. This is a fella, for now, mostly fellas, at least public perception of them being fellas. And at some point there'll be a female president, yeah. There's going to be a female governor, most likely of Virginia, coming in 2025. Is it going to be Winsome Earl Sears or Abigail Spanberger? That seems to be the cool kids' pick for the two that'll run against each other. But for now, the president, genderless, has amazing autonomy and authority. And this is why this blood sport is so important. Because the president, through his executive branch offices, his knights of the round table, the cabinet secretaries, and it's not obviously Department of Justice or Department of Homeland Security, you know, they have police forces and courtrooms. But the EPA has a police department and a courtroom. The IRS certainly has a police department and a courtroom system of their own. Department of Education has a police department and an extra constitutional, outside of Article 3 court system of their own as well. These are all people who only work at the pleasure of the president. The Health and Human Services, all of these folks can arrest you and put you in court and detain you and deprive you of your life, liberty, and property without ever having to worry about whether or not something has passed judicial muster or congressional muster either. And that's why this has to try to throw Georgia off, because Georgia's a big win for President Trump. But they think because of Brian Kemp and their Attorney General, Raffensperger, that they figure there's Republicans who would, if feeling like it, well, let the Democrats have Georgia. I'm just going to sit here and have me a mint julep. So you know, we would then be facing a whole different electoral map. And that's why this Georgia case is so important, because they want to be able to turn Georgia blue without actually turning Georgia blue. And what they hope is, whatever the case outcome of this is, that they can taint Raffensperger and Kemp enough to make a lot of Republicans go, and never Trumper, blah, blah, blah. I'm not voting for these bastards. I'm going to vote RFK Jr. And that's what this is all about. It's all gamesmanship. It's significant sound and fury, signifying what appears to be nothing, but really is everything. Because in this matter of who pulls the electoral sword out of the stone and gets to wield Excalibur for the next 4 years, it's blood sport for those like Bata and the other blue state attorneys general who are bringing this case. Coming up, we'll get into some of the other things, but if you hang in there, we'll also be doing a little special on the General Assembly reconvening on the governor's veto and how that's going. Also, the kind of preview what this budget wrangling is going to be about as well, coming up here on Joe Thomas in the Morning.
A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon, mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight, otherwise mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73, partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for joining in here as we frantically scurry about here behind the scenes. You get behind that bookshelf there, and we do some stuff. I want to get into a story because this is one of those stories that just I know the answer to the question because it works. That's what the answer to the question is. But there was a story that I came across this morning that just screamed out to me. What if a Republican said this? What if a conservative? What if somebody like me said this? The editorial board member from the Washington Post says that many will not survive unless there's cultural and political systems that change. Karen Attiah, I'm sure that's not how she pronounced it, Karen Attiah, raised eyebrows on social media Tuesday when she argued that many will not survive unless there is a shift in cultural and political systems in the country. In a back-and-forth thread on X, the former Twitter, said that this regards marginalized communities insisting that they divest from institutions and systems in the United States and enter into a self-preservation mode, arguing that they, meaning the governments, will not save us, meaning the marginalized communities of America. Now, first and foremost, again, the phrase marginalized communities is very much like the phrase unhoused. Well, who marginalized you? Are you saying that there was somebody who actually marginalized you and pushed you off and denied you access to something? Let's bring that into a courtroom. Because we do have laws. See the previous segment. There are things like the Voting Rights Act that say if you are denied something based on your race, your creed, these are things that we have laws currently on the books that will stop and will punish any SOB that does it. But I thought about it. I said, this is kind of interesting because I know people who are in the, let's just say, prepping community that are considered nuttier than squirrel poo for their attitude of like, well, I better have, several years' supply of freeze-dried food in my basement. I better have enough ammunition for my Second Amendment. I better have gold at my call because at some point the currency is going to go sideways or collapse altogether. And we're considered nutty. We who do that are considered crazies. But here's this Karen Attiah from the Washington Post saying, oh, the marginalized communities had better, get ready to divest from the political institutions that are no longer protecting us. And there's part of me, and maybe part of you as well, at 434-882-4217. Again, leave a voicemail. We'll play your comments back. who says, we understand how you feel because the government has been lying to you for minimum 60 years. When the President of the United States in 1964 said to the Americans, we're going to start a new society, a society based on making sure everyone has abundance and liberty. Since then, 4 times as many people live underneath the poverty line, but maybe that's what the president meant. It's not so much abundance, but we'd all have the same lack of abundance, so who would know? And the people who really did have abundance, careful, Joe, because when I talk like this, people say, oh, you sound like a lefty there, Joe. Go after them rich people. Well, but we are still grappling with how an economy that doesn't create a lot of jobs when it creates a lot of wealth deals with that. And part of it has to come into how much wealth something is worth. There's a wonderful piece, I'm going to break bread with a friend of mine, Neil Williamson from the Free Enterprise Forum, pointed out very appropriately that the price of something, the price somebody will pay for it is based on what that person thinks that thing is worth. And if somebody doesn't want to pay $11 or $12 for a Whopper, that's probably because they think, oh, gosh, $11 or $12, that's a lot for a Whopper sandwich. I might like the Whopper sandwich. Heck, I've made my fair share of Whopper sandwiches. My father was part of the team that made Burger King what it was. But $12 for a Whopper sandwich, is it worth that? Because people, they talk about living wages and things like that in this abstract that seems to be of the mindset that you can kind of invent the value of your work. Well, what is your work? Well, I'm here. I exist, therefore I am. And therefore I must be paid for my existence. No, that's not how it works. And there are people, the Marxists especially, who will tell you, no, we must make sure that your mere existence is rewarded. Well, how are you going to get anything special if just existence is rewarded? And that's where, this is why this imperial presidency, this elected monarchy that leads the attorney general from the previous story to go into crazy duck mode and try to legally flip elections. And I guess it's okay to try to legally flip an election before it happens. If you try to check on the votes after it happens, apparently that's insurrectionist and makes you a threat to democracy in and of itself. And I would want to be a threat to democracy in and of themselves. So this Washington Post editor, Atia, was pointing to the decision by the University of Southern California to cancel a valedictorian speech at the school graduation ceremony after a series of anti-Israeli social media posts that she had made were discovered. She's Muslim. Claiming censorship and racism and hypocrisies onto the assault, starvation, and depopulation of Palestinians in Gaza is revealing. So this Washington Post editorial writer is obviously pro-terrorist. But where is she on the depopulation of the black community on the tables of Planned Parenthood? Since depopulation is obviously a big point to her in these marginalized communities. See, this is the trouble with this post-Great Society country, is that we're constantly chasing our tail to try to create a country, a government that provides for people. I'll agree with Ms. Atia from the Washington Post on this. If you're asking the government to do something for you, you're already on a fool's errand. Already you're on a fool's errand because they can't. Not sufficiently, not for anyone who's ever pled the bureaucracy for something. We have a grant program for new businesses up to $1.5 million available to each small business after they fill out all these forms and get them back to us in triplicate so they can be ignored and buried in soft peat for 3 months and recycled as firelighters. How many of you have ever applied for one of those grants? One of those government programs? How many of you have actually gotten everything you were promised from the government? I'd argue there's probably a very, very small minority of even the people who are gathered here watching us on YouTube and Rumble have ever even come close to what the government, they'll go on TV and say, getmoney.gov, and President Biden, a frozen picture of President Biden, or maybe the one saying, I did this. And it's always late night TV where you're sitting there without your shirt on, eating Doritos and salsa and watching, some rerun of the Andy Griffith Show right before the P90X commercials come back on. And they'll hit you, there's grants for what you do. Do you want to learn data entry? And it sounds like, data entry, that sounds important. Again, the value is, what are you worth? How replaceable are you? If we want to talk about marginalization, how replaceable are you? Because that's really how you judge somebody's value. Can I get online? Can I go to ziprecruiter.com and find another one of you pretty easily? And how much do they charge to replace you? There's a statistic in baseball, wins over replacement, where they take the average output of everyone else who plays your position and they compare your stats to it in a mathematical frenzy to try to get nerds and mathematicians into baseball. I'm sorry, that was unfair. It was a little unfair. But what about an economic wins over replacement? I want to make more than $15 an hour. Okay. What's your wins over replacement value? What do you mean? I mean, if I get somebody else in here for $10 an hour, are they going to be able to do the same thing you are? Well, that's not fair. I deserve more money. Why? What extra value are you providing? This is the economic lunacy that this government-driven regulation state has created, is the idea that everything just always becomes more expensive. It starts with property values. There's a post from Tom on the YouTube channel, says, close friend runs a prep school that says we don't take government vouchers. We don't want the government strings attached. That's several schools very much like that. Certainly most famous is Hillsdale College that does that. Because there are always strings attached. So like I said, you have to fill out all these forms to prove to the government that you are part of this marginalized community that Karen Attiah, but she outs herself in this piece where she then admits that it's really about the Islamists and saying, well, having somebody go up on the lectern and valedictorian and say, killed all the Jews, or from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, probably isn't going to sit very well. And again, these are the same people who will claim in the previous segment that this marginalized community of African Americans, black community, has been marginalized. It's all a manner of convenience. That's the point I'm trying to make, is this chasing the tail around. And when you create these marginalized communities, eventually bad people, whether it be the mafia or the Hamas or anyone, is going to say, hey, what if we get ourselves declared a marginalized community? Who's in charge of that? Is that a UN commission that gets to anoint us as maybe conservatives in Central Virginia could get themselves declared a marginalized community.
A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon, mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight, otherwise mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73, partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
This first piece today contains so many of our favorite people and somebody brand new that we haven't really had a chance to meet before, but it involves the Alliance Defending Freedom and the Manhattan Institute and so many folks who have joined in along with the group United for Privacy to fight back one of the most insidious things that we've talked about on here for several years now, the going after donors of organizations to try to well diminish their impact and to scare them off. And joining us to talk about this, Brian Hawkins. Brian, thank you for taking some time out with us. How are you doing this weekend?
I am doing well. We got some beautiful weather here in Northern Virginia, so I'm trying to maximize my golf time while we have it.
Yeah, cherry blossoms, dogwood trees, and everything else that makes Virginia beautiful in the springtime is in full effect, as well as the green dust that lands on your golf cart while you're at Dos Equis. So talk about this amicus brief that you've joined into to fight back, because we've covered this before, or actually maybe before we get into the specifics of it, talk about the essence of what the authoritarians are trying to do by going after groups and saying, you have to tell us who gave you the money to do what you do.
Yeah, and I'm going to step back one more a little bit, introduce myself and our organization, but People United for Privacy, we are a nonprofit advocacy organization. So we fight to protect the right to privately donate to nonprofit organizations. You know, we view nonprofit donor privacy as a fundamental American right, going back to the founding. We actually just published an article on our blog, going back to James Madison, as of course you and your audience knows, but when he was writing about when he was writing the Federalist Papers, advocating for ratification of the Constitution, he did it under a pen name, and he did it because James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, they wanted their arguments to be front and center for why the Constitution should be adopted, not their own individual identities. So they all published these the Federalist Papers under a pen name, published them anonymously. And that really goes to show the importance of donor privacy, is that whenever we're debating these important public issues of the day, the person speaking or funding it shouldn't matter. What should matter are the merits of the debate, the merits of the issue. So we fight to protect that right, so we can make sure that these public debates are occurring in a free marketplace of ideas. So on this specific subpoena that we're talking about today, it was a First Choice Resource, Women's Resource Center. It's a crisis pregnancy center in New Jersey. And the Attorney General of New Jersey came up with this novel legal theory based upon consumer protection laws making some allegations against First Choice Women's Center, trying to shut them down. And basically, as part of their litigation against First Choice Resource Center, they filed a subpoena requiring the center to disclose all their donors and try to access other confidential information from the group. So fortunately, First Choice, had found legal counsel from Alliance Defending Freedom, great partners. They do a lot of really good work. They try to fight back against this subpoena. So ADF appealed up to the Supreme Court, and that's where Manhattan Institute, Ilya Shapiro, also another great partner, great guy, drafted this amicus brief in support of First Choice Resource Center, saying, SCOTUS, you guys need to shut this down. Like, this subpoena is a tremendous burden on free speech. It violates recent Supreme Court case law, and we need to affirm their First Amendment rights to speak on issues of public importance.
Now, we've seen this have some impact. A friend of mine, he's an elected office holder. Don't hold it against him, but he says, why do they do it? And he looks at you and he says, because it works. And what they do seemingly is they go after these groups, and we've seen it in governors' mansions. Andrew Cuomo threatened to go after donors, threatened to unbank firearms manufacturers. This kind of thing is really rampant now. It's interesting you bring up the fact that they wanted, even back at the founding of the nation, to blunt that. But if you talk about the Supreme Court's decisions regarding funding and campaign finance, they've certainly have made it clear that the opinion of the Supreme Court in the United States is cash contributions, monetary contributions do constitute speech, right?
Yes, absolutely. So with I briefly mentioned AFP v. Bonta. Let me explain that one briefly. So that's Americans for Prosperity Foundation v. Bonta. Bonta was the Attorney General of California. And basically what happened was, almost 10 years ago at this point, former California Attorney General Kamala Harris, a very familiar name, basically required a bunch of nonprofits in California to submit their Schedule B-990 form. The Schedule B-990 is a form that nonprofits submit to the IRS, and it includes lists of all their donors. State attorney generals generally do not need that information, but they can access it. The problem with California and Attorney General Harris at the time is that her office was actively leaking all the donor lists to nonprofits like Americans for Prosperity Foundation. And of course, conservative donors are the ones who are hampered the most when this happened, because the left-wing activist apparatus, they're well organized. They show up at your place of business to protest. They are inundating people with death threats and calling their homes. And there's so many different examples of this. So when these conservative donors get doxxed, it's a tremendous burden on their life. So in their lifestyle and their families. And
absolutely.
We hear these. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and that's to me, I think the goal is to take the funding away from groups like the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, People United for Privacy, because I truly believe that the agenda doesn't work if there's privacy. The agenda of private property, privacy, and your effects, as the Fourth Amendment states, just doesn't fly in the eye of this Eurocentric kind of government that we're tacking towards. And so while there's the specific, Brian, that you're talking about, I think the grander aspect of it, we even see it. I bring up the Third Amendment frequently because people glaze over there. They all hear about the Fourth, but I'm like, listen,
ordering soldiers.
Well, but in 1789, soldier just meant an officer of the government. How many FBI, CIA, NSA people have access to Facebook and Twitter? Oh, it's just the metadata, except when it's not. And then, and we thought you were communicating, and somebody on your friends list was from Yemen, and so now we can survey. And that intrusiveness has become almost commonplace, and it worries me that organizations like yours, Brian, are going to find it harder and harder to fight back because people have just kind of glazed over the idea of being private anymore
Yeah.
or having privacy. Talk about that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it points to another forgotten section of the First Amendment of the Bill of Rights and Constitution. Everyone knows the First Amendment, but how many people know the actual 5 clauses of the First Amendment? One of them being the privacy, the right to freely associate people with like mind,
Yep.
and for us to get together and form an association. You look at what Alexis de Tocqueville said
Mhm.
in his tour of America. And he said, like, one of the great things about American democracy is that people get together and they organize around things they believe in. And that right is protected by the freedom to associate. So to zoom it out a little, and sorry, I have a tendency to get a little wonky here, but I appreciate you
That's
zooming
okay. We
out.
like wonky here. No, no. With programming format of the show is the wonkier the better.
No, you don't want to get me down that path here, but yeah, to zoom it out, that freedom to associate is directly related to your freedom to contribute to nonprofit organizations for a number of reasons. One, if you're a membership organization, you pay a membership due. Knights of Columbus, the VFW, any other nonprofit organization where you pay your membership dues. That's a constitutional right.
Mhm.
And those dues and your right to associate should not be disclosed to the government. And just similarly being able to donate to a nonprofit, donors to People United for Privacy, ADF, Manhattan Institute, whatever, but like they are associating with people with like mind, with shared agenda, and that's a right protected by the Constitution.
Mhm. Mhm. Is part of this driven though by the authoritarian state anyway? Because right now we've created this governing system that invokes things on people, will create. We talk about this frequently. This elected monarchy that we have, where one person runs the executive branch, and each one of the knights of his round table, the cabinet ministers, have their own police department. They have their own court system, and they're working extra constitutionally only at the pleasure of the president. And that part of it is where I feel like they use that to get around the constitutional prohibitions, but also it's so that they can be seen as doing things for people. Because if the government doesn't have the ability to force some agenda point on me, I don't care where they got their money from because they
Yeah.
can't invoke it on me.
Yeah, it's now you're speaking after an issue that's near and dear to my heart, the administrative state and how the administrative bureaucracy has just accumulated powers that are been reserved for other branches of government. And you're kind of implying this here, but with administrative bureaucracy have law enforcement powers, they have prosecutory powers, they have their own courts,
Mhm.
and they have legislative powers. They're able to create basically new laws wholesale out of guidance documents or regulations or whatever that has very little political accountability. And yeah, we see this here. I don't know if you remember the case with Lois Lerner, who was the commissioner of the I.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm personal friends with Chris Horner, who helped unearth all that stuff.
Oh, awesome. All right, so you know this
So,
story.
oh no,
Awesome.
actually, yeah, the government accountability, and it is interesting. Um, there's several publications that the Government Accountability and Oversight Group have put out. Chris specifically on one of them is titled "Law Enforcement for Rent," and the next one is "Government for Rent," where you know they avoid scrutiny. They will deny FOIA requests, just like you said, Lois Lerner, but yet we have to hand over our donor documents to them.
Yeah.
Does that speak volumes about how they view the citizen government
Well,
relation?
it's oh man, you're getting me all pumped up. 'Cause
Good.
this also came up in this
As we say here, kick the fires and light the tires. So go ahead.
this came up here with the First Choice Women's Resource Center case of the AG is arguing to SCOTUS that um SCOTUS cannot intervene until there's an actual violation of of their First Amendment right. So the violation of the First Amendment right being submitting the donor information to the AG. So in order to even get remedy to exercise the first to have your rights protected, you have to have your rights violated first. Like, that's wrong. That's backwards.
Well, they used the same argument with Obamacare. When people brought the Affordable Care Act to court, the court said, "I'm sorry, nobody has actually paid the
Yes.
fine yet, so we
Yeah.
can't do anything." I was like, "Wow, that's that's like saying, well, there's a guy running around the school with a rifle. We can't do anything yet because he hasn't actually pulled the trigger." I
Yeah.
mean, at some point you actually have to say, what is, bring them into court and let them tell you why they need to know this information at least, right, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I think we just see this on the left more broadly. It's like they're willing to push the legal bounds. Sometimes they even know that they're going to lose in court, but while we're fighting it out in court, we are getting drained of our resources.
Mhm.
Organizations have to shut down. Donors are already exposed. So it's like, and at the end of the day, 5 years later, like, oh, we actually win, but a lot of the damage has already been done. And yeah, it just goes to show of how our constant or the current state of our country, the rights are backwards. We're basically begging, as citizens, we have to beg the courts to protect our rights, as opposed to the government begging to have to show why they need to violate our rights. It's a disturbing trend.
A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon. Mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight. Otherwise, mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73. Partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now, back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for letting us be of service to you on this Thursday morning. Delegate Tom Garrett on the veto session coming up. Mac McDonald's notebook visiting with Brian Hawkins. losing our, and it was something in our connection with Brian went sour, and so he had to run anyway. So we just let him finish out. But I don't know what happened. As soon as we clicked back to his video link, all the mics went off, and science, I don't understand it. Upside technology is returning, where the live phone calls and things like that will be coming back soon. There, a couple of comments on there, because I actually had some compliments on the video, probably before we lost the audio to it there. Also, this one comes in on the subject of privacy in the Bill of Rights. And we were talking just anecdotally, talking about the issue of privacy in the Bill of Rights and how much of the Bill of Rights is actually built around privacy. And this goes back to why people need to make James Madison or Thomas Jefferson the villain of history. Oh, slave owners, marginalized communities because of these fellows. And it comes down to getting rid of the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, as Barack Obama said, and really at the sun source of this next lurch towards Marxism, and it starts Lyndon Johnson. And you see, the sad thing is you don't know who the serious Marxists are versus just the pandering populists. Because the pandering populists will read Marx and say, yeah, I kind of like this stuff. This is great. If I say this on the campaign trail, they'll all vote for me. Lyndon Johnson said it himself. He said, if we pass this, I will insert the phrase black community for what he said, will vote for us for the next 200 years. Well, he was short of that mark because I've seen the polling data, and the black community is abandoning Lyndon Johnson's political party in droves. I mean, it's not 50-50 yet like the Latino community, but it is a substantial erosion of support in that community that Lyndon Johnson was convinced that once we started giving them everything, they're just going to keep voting for the sugar daddy. That's not the case. Even with all the aborted babies in the black communities of New York and Philadelphia and Chicago, they're starting to wake up. They're awake, not woke. And they're realizing these problems are there. But Nancy writes in on the subject of privacy in the Bill of Rights. She said the reason was that King George, without the authority, had to spy on the colonists to find out what was going on so he could quell it. And easily 50, if not more, % of the Bill of Rights is specifically or tangentially connected.
A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon, mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight, otherwise mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73, partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning, and our friend Mac McDonald joining us in from the sports world, where he will take us to his notebook where everything has been written down so neatly. You have very nice penmanship too, Mac, by the way. How are you doing this morning?
We might want to look at that very carefully.
So look at that, single-spaced, and yeah, your high school penmanship teacher would be very proud.
We could share these notes. I could show you what I show all our students. Anyway, good morning, Joe. We are to Thursday, so a lot going on with the NBA. Talk about UVA, first of all, because they beat George Mason last night, the baseball team, winning 11-5. They had 14 hits. Eric Becker, a triple in his 4th homer of the year. And they're 29-9. They got Georgia Tech coming in for the weekend. But I want to give props to Virginia women's lacrosse team. They picked up a Commonwealth Clash dub over Virginia Tech. Little come-from-behind win in Blacksburg, 14-12. And UVA's team 13-3. They're 6-3, and now will enter the ACC tournament. First 13-win season in 5 years. Wow. You gotta love that. All right, Bulls win 131-118 over Atlanta. Miami loses to the Sixers 105-104. Chicago will travel to South Beach Friday. Jimmy Butler has an MCL issue. So anyway, they're close to elimination in book and tee times. All right, Orioles have won 4 straight and 6 of 8. Yesterday, Cedric Mullins walked off, and the Birds sweep the Twins, winning 4-2. Here's how it sounded.
Never hit a walk-off home run. Until now, maybe. Deep right field. Cedric Mullins. Good night. Sweet dreams, Minnesota. Cedric Mullins with the first walk-off home run of his career.
So you teach sports journalism. How do these play-by-play guys know that this is going to happen? I mean, if they don't want.
Oh, you mean how do you predict? You say it. You set the.
Yeah. How do they do that? If they don't want us
He's
to
never
be
had a walk-off.
These conspiracy theories write themselves, Mac. Anyway,
it's a wish.
Yeah,
it's a thing inside. It's kind of a wish.
And
anyway.
It's nice for Seamull because he was around through all the woe-begotten wandering in the wilderness anyway. I mean, he was the guy that was sort of the only reason to show up at Camden Yards for a while with the Orioles while they were building all these farm system things. So it's nice that he gets to ride along like Zim when the Nats went to the World Series.
Right. And it's, and one of the most overlooked managers in the world has to be Davey Martinez. I mean, because he continues to put together youth and managing the way he does and the youth. I mean, he just does an outstanding job.
Anyway. Today. So when he started that back in 19, I mean, they were like 17, 18 games back, and he said, let's just go 1-0 today.
I mean, I know it's only April. Okay, let's not get excited. They're 4.5
well,
back.
No, but I mean, this whole weekend they're celebrating. This is the first time the Astros have been in the district since 2019. So they're doing a whole bunch
that's
of
my
stuff.
second. That's my second entry here. Washington took the series from the Dodgers in LA, winning yesterday 2-0. Starter Jake Irvin throws 6 scoreless to get his first win. He gave up just 4 hits, and he got a dinger from C.J. Abrams, second pitch of the game.
Swing by Abrams at the 1-0 pitch into the air to deep right center field. This is way back. At the wall is Outman. He can only watch. It is gone. Goodbye. Bang! Zoom goes Abrams with his 5th home run of the year. RBI number 11.
How about that bat crack?
Oh, that's good stuff.
It's like they hit a microphone. Anyway, Nats have won 6 of the last 10. And as Joe was just saying, they get the Astros and Justin Verlander in Friday in D.C. Well, anyway, another weird story from the NBA. They've reached a decision in the investigation into DeJounte Porter's alleged gambling activity. And the punishment? Done. He has been banned from the NBA for life.
Wow.
2 games that were looked at. Toronto's January 26th game against the Clippers and the team's March 20th game against the Kings. In both games, increased interest in Porter's under props, okay? The center left both games early due to injury issues, okay? In both games, those who wagered the under on his stats won bets. According to the NBA, investigators determined that Porter disclosed confidential information about his health status. I'm gonna pull up Lame in the third, by the way.
Yeah.
And an NBA bettor prior to the March 20th game, another person with connections to Porter placed an $80,000 parlay with a potential payout of $1.1 million if Porter underperforms. Of course, the sportsbooks guy, the bet was frozen, so it did not happen.
Wow.
Anyway, so he's banned for life.
But isn't this, why sports betting is dangerous?
Oh.
I mean, it's the class. I mean, people forget, or if you've never watched Pulp Fiction, the understory for the whole thing is Bruce Willis is a boxer who's supposed to take a fall and doesn't, and thus the hilarity ensues with him and Ving Rhames. And I put hilarity in air quotes. I hope people.
It's gone on since the first came and looked at his buddy and goes, "Okay, I got 10 rocks that says you can't kill that raptor." So okay, I got 15 rocks that says there's no way that you get that cave woman over there. So anyway, it's been going on for a long time. Coming up this weekend, coming off we talked about it earlier in the week, and Bud and I recorded Foster and Fringe yesterday, but coming off the Virginia Tech spring game, UVA now will have their spring football game coming up Saturday. It will be on the 2:00 at Scott Stadium. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm fumbling here because I wanted to give really the story of the day, and really a huge story, to spend just a couple of minutes on it. Governor Youngkin signed the bill this morning, and it takes effective July 1. Okay. The inevitability of college athletic departments and their foundations coordinating nil compensation for their athletes has long been clear. But now, overriding NCAA policy, Virginia state law will grant UVA Commonwealth schools the option now. In other words, if you are a donor fighting for your seats and your points and all that goes on, like for the Virginia Student Aid Foundation, because now everything will be in-house, and so your money can also be earmarked for nil compensation for the athletes as well. So in other words, you could say, hey, I would like $1 million to go to XYZ athlete. Okay, I won't name an athlete, but I would like, not $1 million, that's okay. I would like $10,000 to go to XYZ athlete for the Virginia football team. Okay? Interesting. And so that way, that donation will go now towards your Virginia Student Aid points, and that's going to happen at Liberty, Old Dominion, all the schools, Tech, Virginia Tech, and we just had the story, and you'll hear it this weekend. We interviewed Kelly Woolwine, who is the head of Triumph for Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. Now, and we'll probably end up talking to Wally Walker, because that's his job to raise money too, and Lo Davis, because he's in charge of Cavalier Futures. But that is great news, Joe, for colleges and really for the donors now, because they're going to get, I want to give $10,000 to XYZ basketball player. Uh-huh. Okay. Now with that, okay, I want to give McNeely, IMAC, the basketball team, I want to give McNeely $10,000 to promote my store, or I just want to give him $10,000 and he can promote a charity. Okay, that's tax deductible now. Well, so your donation was not tax deductible before.
So
for nil.
Forgive me for only, because I count on you to tell me this stuff, Mac. But where do those schools that had national championships vacated because donors and what was the phrase that used to pay in the NCAA? Lack of institutional control.
Yeah, lack of institutional control.
The donors were going right to the players.
Well, now you bring up a whole other subject.
Was it Reggie Bush?
Yeah, exactly. But here's what's happening. Virginia Tech, and I just know this because I spent 2 days with the Hokies. Okay,
right.
Virginia Tech's internal control people, they feel they have a very good football team coming in 2024. They feel they might make a run. But however, SEC schools, they're looking at SEC schools and what Missouri basically, because they had this law, Missouri basically bought a championship. And not a championship, but bought a very good football team. Okay? Because Missouri they funded the nil program from all over the world, and it was all tax deductible. And so basically donors were helping. So now you have a chance. Now you have a chance to do that kind of thing for nil.
Now, can I do that? Let's say the Joe Thomas in the Morning program decides we have extra cash. Pyramid Paving is
right,
or whatever.
Right.
And I don't want to necessarily sponsor one player because maybe they get injured, maybe they stink.
Fine.
But if I give money to the fund, can I
Yes.
get a logo on the side of the wall? And
yes.
And just,
Hey, Wally Walker, this is Joe Thomas. We are killing it over in Stanton. And I'd like to give $10,000 to the University of Virginia Athletic Department earmarked for nil. So I want you to earmark it for athletes. Okay. Not for scholarships, not for a building, not for a locker room, but I would like to earmark it for Isaac McNeely and his teammates. Okay. Fine. Good. Fine. And then it's now tax deductible.
Okay.
So your nil money is now tax deductible. So what's going to happen? So JMU's got their spring game Saturday as well. Virginia's got their spring football game.
Yeah.
This will be the buzz because for all these public institutions now, Virginia, the Commonwealth is one of, I don't know the number, but it's like one of 6 or 8 states that has made this law, put this bill into law, so people can help college. Now, but here's the fork in the road, as you just talked about. The fork in the road is, all right, Alabama can raise $6 gazillion if they want, and they could give each 85 scholarship football players $100,000. Let's just say that as an example. All right, I'm not giving exact numbers, but I'm saying they can basically fund. It's like the old days where you had 26 athletic programs, but only 12 of them were fully funded.
Right.
Now, where Virginia Student Aid, and it was years ago when Virginia Student Aid and got fully funded, so every team had the right scholarship number that had the scholarship was fully funded. Yeah. Now you can just
target.
You can nil your team to victory.
And you just triggered another. What does this do to Title IX? I mean, obviously in Iowa, maybe the women's basketball team might get a few more bucks.
But for every kid, Joe, that's a great question. But for every kid, really, now it's a golden opportunity. So let's say Caitlin Clark's a senior. All right, let's say she hasn't been drafted yet. Okay. And she's a phenom, and she's going into her senior year. I'm so-and-so in Des Moines, and I own a chain of hotels. Again, this is all off the top of my head. I own a chain of hotels. I want to earmark $20,000 for Caitlin. She can endorse my endorse my hotels if she wants to. However, I'd like for her to endorse the American Cancer Society in the Des Moines chapter, or the Iowa City chapter. So at least the student athletes have something to endorse. Kelly Woolwine at Virginia Tech is the CEO of Life Ring Foundation, which is for pediatric cancer. His daughter, for example, has cancer. So he does this whole big thing with cancer. Well, now, so the athletes have something to endorse.
But
Virginia Tech fan, real quick, Virginia Tech fan, can write a check, okay? And I can say I want $10,000 to go to the Life Ring Foundation. Now, Kyron Drones, quarterback of Virginia Tech. Hi, I'm Kyron Drones for the Life Ring Foundation, support pediatric cancer.
I can see that. I can also see a lot of people saying, hold on a second here. This used to, this was the, whole thing that brought down Reggie Bush and USC. And, I understand
because there are no guidelines. See, the NCAA has said, we don't care. Right now, there's no limit. This is why Saban got out. There's no limit.
It's the wild, wild west.
There's no limit to how much money can be raised by the university. There's no limit.
We have to go, but I'm reminded of the phrase Howard Cosell used to bring up every time he did highlights at halftime. He said, and now the highlights from the league where they play for pay.
For pay. We can carry on the discussion tomorrow, but it's a big vote by the Virginia lawmakers. I'll just tell you that.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right. See you tomorrow morning.
A nice pre-summer forecast for you Thursday. Sunny skies, afternoon highs around 85. Increasing clouds Thursday night with a low around 55. On Friday, a chance of showers, maybe thunderstorms in the afternoon, mostly cloudy with a high of 76. Friday night, chance of showers and storms before midnight, otherwise mostly cloudy and 53. Saturday, mostly sunny and 73, partly sunny and 65 on Sunday. From BlueRidgeLife.com, I'm forecaster Tommy Stafford. Now back to Joe Thomas in the morning.
Joe Thomas in the morning. Thank you for letting us do what we do here in the world of the interwebs and the Joe Thomas in the Morning podcast here on YouTube and Rumble. And gosh, hundreds and hundreds of people watching on Rumble, and I appreciate it. Calls, if you call, you can leave a voicemail, and then we'll play it on the air or whatever we call it here. It's old habits die hard. Is it still considered the air if we're doing a live stream podcast in the mornings? But 434-882-4217, or you can email jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com. Joining us now, he is a member of the Virginia House of Delegates. He is Tom Garrett, 56th District. Tom, good morning. Oh my gosh, what a backdrop you've got there. Is that actually the backyard, or is that?
Zoom's gotten really good with duplicating. This is the Buckingham side of the James River in Scottsville, Virginia. I have a gripe, though. I have a complaint.
Uh-oh.
I'm looking over your shoulder, and I understand product placement, and you don't have my book on your shelf behind you.
And which book is that?
Well, I hadn't written it yet.
Oh, I don't even have my book. Hold it. Here's my unauthorized autobiography. So this, at least I'll put my book up here, and then there'll be something to say for it. What's your book going to be called? There and Back Again, of A Hobbit's Tale?
God is great. I don't know. Daggone it, man. I thought I had you, and you turned the tables on me. This is why you're the best at what you do.
6 cups of these so far, caffeinated. Tom has been invited for several reasons, but the General Assembly back to go over the governor's vetoes, and it's funny watching the internet try to say, well, they're going to override all of his vetoes because they control the House and the Senate. And I'm like, not quite the math that you think you're doing there. So explain how the veto session is going to go.
The Democrats did a pretty good job politically of setting a very sort of Gordian trap for Governor Youngkin, specifically, not even the members of the General Assembly. Obviously, 21-19 in the Senate, 49-51 in the House. They hold both chambers. So what they did was they passed so much bad legislation, intentionally, so much bad legislation that they then essentially dared the governor to do it, and then they didn't amalgamate bills that were largely similar, which we've seen in the past. So you'd have 2 bills that were a scintilla different that both passed both chambers. And historically, if you amalgamate the bills, you just roll them into one. But they've created more stuff for him to review and veto. And so he broke the record. I think we researched the prior record. I think Governor McAuliffe vetoed like 90 some odd bills. Don't quote me. And Governor Youngkin, I believe, had vetoed 151 coming in, but a ton of bad legislation. I want to say like it was 50 or 70 bills that passed like 52 to 48 or 53 to 47. At which point the Democrats go, look at this bipartisan support, right?
Right, 2 people.
And there are Republicans who vote certain subject matter more frequently with the Democrats than they do with us, which makes our job that much harder. But so the governor had a lot of stuff that we in the House had hoped he would veto, that he didn't veto. Now, the good news is they overrode nothing. They didn't try. I think they knew that they couldn't.
The bad news is that I think there was a miscommunication, and this is just me conjecturing here, between the governor and specifically House leadership because when you send us a bunch of bills that 48 or 49 of us voted against with minor tweaks, we're going to vote against them again. And so you got a lot of governor's recommended amendments, which aren't vetoes. He's got a line item in Virginia that we rejected. And so what we did when we did that was sent them back to him and said, not literally, but metaphorically, good enough isn't good enough. These bills that passed 5149 need to be vetoed. And so we'll see what he does. He gets another bite at this apple. But if we didn't like the bill when it said we're going to have bad policy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're not going to like it when it says we're going to have bad policy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? As an example of a sort of small change. So that created an optic that the media then exploited with, look, the Republicans in the House aren't even supporting the interestingly, on the Senate side, essentially, if the governor made an amendment, they supported it. And I'm not going to support an amendment to a bad bill that then allows that bill a glide path into becoming law. We still have another fallback here, and that is that the governor will take action on bills returned to him. So it was essentially a flood the zone, create more work than the governor's limited staff can handle, understanding that we have a part-time legislator. So, for example, the governor's legislative staff is less than 10 people, and you're not going to grow it to 30 because we only meet 60 days a year.
Right.
Having said that, when you pass a couple of thousand pieces of legislation, 10 people are reviewing all of it, that gets tough. So, and that was intentional. And if you're playing politics, it was really actually quite well done, giving the proverbial devil his or her due. I don't know his or her, he, she, they. I don't know how the devil identifies. And the Democrats would certainly want to get his pronouns right. I mean, it's pronouns right. They, them. Anyway, so that's what we had. And so what we have now is sort of a status quo ante insofar as the bills we didn't like, we still don't like, the ones that got through. The governor's vetoes, none of them were overridden. There are a lot more vetoes that need to be made. And we're coming back in May. I think the 13th is the date. There's two takeaways there. We'll see what the governor does with some of these bills that we're hopeful. Again, if 48 or 49 out of 49 Republicans vote against something, don't make small changes and send it back to us and ask us to vote for it. It's just, again, the Senate said, yes, sir, and moved out smartly. And I understand that, but co-equal branches of government should be co-equal, right? So let
that be your pronoun. Well, Tom, let me ask you this, because I know a lot of folks, we had the governor on Monday's show, and people were asking me, we ran out of time, about the things like the marriage bill and things like that. I mean, he's trying to, as far as I can tell, get a budget where there's going to be some sort of tax relief, if not cuts, at least not raising taxes. He said yesterday that they're going to sit down, kind of toss out both budgets and start from scratch, and then have something for you guys by middle of May. I mean, is it all
May I speak to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, God bless them. The Democrats will sound conciliatory and strike a friendly tone when you're standing at the podium next to them, and only when you're standing at the stuff that they said on the floor yesterday. In the interest of concluding the session, I didn't stand up and take the microphone and hurl invective, but it's as if they said, oh yeah, we're going to throw it out and start from scratch. And then they left and started tweeting horrifically deleterious things like, Governor Youngkin just doesn't care about children. Literally 30 seconds in separation. So the scorpion and the frog story, when the scorpion kills the frog, you shouldn't be surprised. He's just being a scorpion. Right. And that's what they've done here.
So what is the offshoot? You mentioned that the governor signed a few bills that I think people were surprised by. And Mac was just telling us he signed the bill that's going to allow people tax deductibility on the name, image, likeness funding. So if Garrett and Harding, attorneys at law, decide to sponsor a running back for the Richmond Spiders, they can do that, I guess, now with some tax advantage, but the average person, doesn't get a tax cut, even when it comes to things like car taxes and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, let me back up again. The NIL stuff is all an interesting distraction, but in the grand scheme, it's not a big deal. You talked about tax relief, if not tax cuts. Let me just be the harbinger of bad news. If we can leave this thing without a tax increase, it'll be a win, right? So what for your listeners and most of your listeners are amongst the most well-informed, and I say that not to patronize them, but it's true.
By all means, patronize them. Don't patronize me.
Well, so the governor comes forward with a comprehensive tax restructuring that would have had tax increases that were more than offset by the tax cuts and would have completed the promise started under Jim Gilmore to end the car tax, right? We haven't ended the car tax in the last 25 years because localities have a very limited revenue stream to sort of select from as they generate revenue to do things like pay our sheriff's deputies and pay our teachers.
Yeah.
And so Youngkin addressed that, right? He was going to get rid of it, and we were going to send money back to the localities that more than made them whole. The Democrats took the budget that Youngkin proposed, took out all the tax cuts, kept all the tax increases, and then walked to the podium and said, "These are Youngkin's tax increases. Why doesn't he like them?" And again, don't be surprised when the scorpion acts like a scorpion. So right now, with minorities in both chambers, there's going to be a staring down contest that will recommence. Well, it's going on now, but they'll sort of crescendo, hopefully, May 13th through 15 when we go back, and the governor's going to say, "Look, guys, we have the revenue we need and then some. Why do you need to raise taxes?" And they're going to say, "But the tax increases we proposed are the ones that you had proposed just 6 months ago." That's exactly what's going to happen. My crystal ball is infallible on this. And so if
Larry Sabato's on the phone saying, "Give it back."
Hey, I'm there, but we need about 5 more of me, and not instead of 2, because again, we have Republicans that vote like Democrats a lot of times.
Well,
catch me off there, I'll name.
The average Virginian is looking at this General Assembly, Tom, and saying, well, the Republicans must be for all this stuff because, as you said, the scorpion is out there over the carcass of the frog saying, "What? I'm a scorpion," but is also saying that Governor Youngkin is the one that suggested these things, and I guess maybe that's the lesson to be learned by somebody whose first foray into politics.
That's the prize you get for acting in good faith. That's exactly correct. That is what he gets for acting in good faith. He proposed something that would have been revolutionary, right? So if I'm grading the governor, I mean, the courage that it took, knowing the nature of the opposition, to say, "Hey, we can raise these taxes so long as we cut these taxes more," that was impressive. But that was never going to play. I think he looked people in the eyes and gave his word and thought he had the same in return and learned a tough lesson. So
but let's talk about that, because this is your second go around in the Virginia General Assembly, and I do people privately, what is the power of this political party that seems to get people to hang up their individual thoughts and processes at the door? You mentioned some Republicans that vote along with the Democrats, I think mostly because they feel like they're in purplish districts, so they have to show some thing. But there are Democrats in purplish districts who just act like they have a 75-25 majority.
Well, the sad truth is that the vast majority of the voting public isn't down in the weeds on things like NIL specifics, or even gun policy, and so they get the jingoism and the rhetoric, and that drives them left or right. So when you vote with the Democrats a few times and think it's going to protect you, it won't. The Democrats will find a time that you didn't, or the fact that you call yourself a Republican, and they'll use that as a cudgel. The reason I think that the Democrats demonstrate such a herd mentality is philosophical at its core, right? I mean, who ran out to get a quote unquote vaccine that very well may have done more harm than good, and who was skeptical, right? So, and the most important thing to teach your kids, in my opinion, is to question from the left and question from the right, and then engage in rational thought and ask subsequent questions, because oftentimes the answer to the first question, for example, should everyone have access to affordable health care, is all too easy. But the second, third, who pays, how, what is health care, what are the left and right limits? Those are the questions that drive people who are thinking people to the right. But I think that there's a philosophical herd mentality that exists more, and you see this with forms of governmental sort of preference. Socialism and communism are collectivist systems wherein they believe that certain people know better. Now, that would indicate that there's some humility to believe sometimes where you disagree that someone else knows better, and I don't see that. So you get groupthink. The other thing is that you're punished, whether in Washington or Richmond, for being a free thinker. The greatest example of my political lifetime is that of Chap Peterson, who less than 2 decades ago was the scion of the New Left. He was the up-and-coming, bright, shining star of liberalism in Virginia, and he just lost his seat because he wasn't liberal enough. So, while 20 years it may sound like a long time to your 20-year-old listeners, not very long. And so if you don't, and so Chap's guilty, and Tulsi Gabbard at the federal level, these folks are guilty of thinking for themselves, right? So there's a real fear in a world where people covet a lapel pin and a title of losing that. And that drives them to do as they're told, because there will be punishment whether now or later. Well, I can tell the difference between radio and video is I can tell you want me to stop talking, you have questions. Well, on radio, it just kept going.
Because we get, supposedly, a republic is supposed to make sure that the voice of the minority is protected. So that would imply that, a Republican minority in the House, even though a small one, would have some ability to move things forward or stop things or force negotiation over it. But there are structural things, and we've talked about them, about the way the committees, especially in the Senate, are designed or set up. Are there things in your, now having spent a session with these folks, that need to be changed in the structure, in the things that go on pre-cloakroom, which is a famous expression for where all the deals are supposedly made in any General Assembly, so that the structure guarantees that the minority at least gets some sway or say?
Well, if I did write a book, I've put a lot of thought into why Washington is perhaps irretrievably lost, and I can lay some of those ideas and how to save it if it can be done. And I can lay some of those ideas on Virginia. Virginia is good news, not nearly as far gone as Washington, but first of all, the committee structure, even in Virginia, is where power arises from. And when I say power, I mean the ability to fundraise and be of influence on policy, because particular committees are going to hear more bills or more important bills, what have you. In Washington, fealty is rewarded by cherry committee assignments. You knew when a guy like Denver Riggleman got up there as a freshman and went on the banking committee, the financial services committee, that he'd made a deal, right? I mean, that absolutely, positively never, ever, ever happens unless people in leadership think, I got this guy. And the way that they punish you is to take away that committee assignment, which makes your fundraising easier, makes you more powerful and influential. And so you very rarely see people get removed from those committees, and there's a reason. They do as they're told. And this is a reason that I'll never, ever, I don't care how long I'm in the General Assembly, I'm not going to be on the Appropriations Committee. I've spoken with people who chaired said committee, or finance in the Senate is the same thing, because I'm not going to nod off on a budget that has 5% garbage in it, right? I mean, 1 or 2% because we're fallible and we miss things, but I'll just never do that. And so the way you change it ultimately is to change who you elect, whether from the left or the right. And the litmus test should be that if you're not willing to vote for or against something that could cost you your job, then you shouldn't be elected anyway. Because the people are cogs in the wheel, right? Yeah. The job is bigger than the person who occupies it. There's a wonderful example from history. Do you know what John Quincy Adams did after he was president of the United States?
I do. He went and got himself elected to Congress.
That's right. And so you would think that would be like Bob McDonnell running for the House of Delegates, right? You would think that it would be beneath, or Terry McAuliffe, which he would never in a million years do, beneath a guy who had served in that chief executive role to go back and be 1/100th of 1/2 of 1/3 of our government, right? But it wasn't, because John Quincy Adams understood that his ability to make an impact wasn't limited by the number of terms that he could serve as president, because he followed the precedent set by George Washington, but instead by his willingness to work. And he essentially humbled himself to serve in a position beneath that which he had been in previously, because it was important to him. And so we need to elect women and men who are willing to take the punch to the face that's required if you wish to be a pugilist, that might be required to do that which they think is right. And go back to Chap Peterson, who I love. Way back when I was in the Senate, there was a bill on education, and I spoke with Chap at the time over some drinks the night before. This is a decade plus ago, and understood that he and I were largely in agreement. And the next day, the vote was held on the floor, and he voted the opposite way. And I grabbed him by the shirt sleeve on the way out and said, "What expletive deleted happened?" And he said, "I don't want to talk about it." But what I knew was that the VEA lobbyist had been in the Democrat caucus that day. And I don't know what they said, and I don't know if threats were leveled, but I'm going to presume that they were, and that they backed someone down on principle. And I respect that guy. I actually genuinely like him and consider him a friend, because there was something he felt like he could lose. Well, you need to be willing to, was it Huey Long of all people who said if he can't smoke their free cigars and eat their free steaks and tell them to go to hell the very next day, then you belong in a different line of work?
Sure.
And so you just need to learn how to say no, or even in some instances, hell no. And that's we're not electing those people. So, you know, what do you
so much is so much now beholden. I was just reading a piece on Breitbart about these staffers, Ziegler and a couple other folks who are in Mike Johnson's office, and how they're connected on K Street to the military-industrial complex. And we talk about term limits for folks like you who get elected to office, but these are the people who I worry about, the ones that we don't know their names until it becomes an expose in Breitbart, that all of a sudden somebody says so-and-so is Tom Garrett's chief of staff, and I know yours is an honorable man, but you know, the point being that these are the people, especially if you term limit a congressman, they just get to go on there for decades and make all the friends and get all the power.
In Washington, and I'm vehemently opposed, and I like the convention of states idea, with the exception of term limits. And I'll say, and again, this is me saying stuff that I know is not popular.
You see, I go the other way. I want it to be a more expansive term limits. I want to term limit these paid staffers, these career staffers. I want to limit how much K Street can get to the floor. I mean, for example,
then you've given power to the consultants that they already have too much of. So ultimately, what we should do is inform ourselves as an electorate and demand particular things from our elected officials. Now, Virginia's not, but your point is really on point. And in Washington, let's term limit people. Well, you're throwing out, Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, Jim Jordan, along with AOC and Pelosi. You're throwing out the proverbial baby with the bathwater, and you keep that staff around, and you got people in the Charlottesville area who have family members, one of whom specifically I'm thinking of, who's the chief of staff in Washington, remarkably powerful man. And now this happened to have been a good man with good guiding principles, but he had a floor pass and more influence than probably 50+% of the members, and was never elected by anyone and was never accountable to anyone. Praise goodness that this guy was a good fella, but that sort of power and accountable to no one.
Right.
And I happen to be a Mike Johnson fan. But that sort of power was not conceptually meant to be given to people who didn't stand for election, who weren't approved every so often by the citizenry.
Well,
but now let me complete the thought. Sorry. Okay. In Richmond, it's not nearly as bad. You do see a high rate of legislative aides going on to become delegates and senators, but that's not in and of itself a problem. Richmond's not nearly as bad as DC, probably because it's a part-time legislature, and even the support staff, at least on the legislative side, often has other gigs.
Right. Well, but where I was going with this is, isn't this, though, on a grander scale, indicative of governments, as Lyndon Johnson said 60 years ago, I'm going to create a government that will guarantee you abundance and liberty, and it's done neither, but there's now funding streams, even if it's 25%.
You know who has abundance and liberty? The government. They do what they want with what you earn.
But we don't get it on this end,
right?
And we keep voting for people saying, well, this one's going to go get me my stuff. It's like the clip from Frasier that I used to always play. I'm not leaving until I get justice. Well, maybe not justice, more like preferential treatment, but I'm not leaving till I get it. That's the problem. Government and we watch it with this presidential election. It's electing a monarch, and a monarch who can come in with his Knights of the Round Table, each with their own police department and court system. And we hate it when Republicans are out of office, but if a Republican gets elected president, we're all for it. We've got to wake up and realize we're asking all of these governments to do too many things that they're not qualified to do.
It's like a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old sibling. They did it first as a justification for bad behavior, and that's not the way the world should work.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Tom. I was very worried because I'm looking at the clock, and I know that in the podcast world you can just go on. Joe Rogan goes on for hours, or he cuts it off at 15 minutes or whatever. But when I asked you that question, I said, oh my gosh, it's coming up on 8 o'clock, and Tom's going to have like a 45-minute answer to this that I'm going to want to hear because it's going to be brilliant. But we're running out of daylight, and I'm sure
it's like you've interviewed me before.
Yeah, well, or vice versa. There, Tom Garrett, 56th District, Virginia House of Delegates. How do people find you online? Is it Facebook still? Are you back in there? Or?
Yeah, you can find Delegate Tom Garrett on Facebook. I got Garrett in exile at x.com. I haven't used it in about forever, but it's my intent to start using it again. Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me. I hope we do it again sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Just for those of you in the viewing world, I got a text message from Joe Thomas at 4:22 a.m. asking if I could come on this morning. And
That's
I'm a late sleeper.
That's show prep for you.
and I'm a late sleeper, so at 6:24 I responded.
Well, but you see, this is what do they say? BC and AD. Before, I don't know what C would be, but AD is after drinking. So I know Tom Garrett is much more likely to answer an early morning text today than he was, say, 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
6 years ago, May 24th. Hey, man, I am so happy for you and proud of you, and just love to know that you're my friend. And whether you had a radio show or not, you've been an absolute blessing in my life. So I'm looking forward to watching your meteoric ascent, or even your slow, steady ascent. But you're a good man, and good things are coming. God bless you.
I'm going to do the slow, steady ascent. This is why we didn't get a lot of Wall Street money, because they reward the meteoric and then jump off before the gravity kicks in. Tom, you have a great morning, sir.
God bless you. God bless all your listeners, man. God bless Virginia and America. It's a great day.
Absolutely, and we can get it back. I mean, this is one of the reasons that I refer to the word restorative when we talk about things like conservative versus liberal, that kind of thing. I say I want to be a restorative. I want to go back and restore all those things, including the appropriate scale and scope of government. So we'll do it again tomorrow morning. Again here. We'll be right here for a Friday morning. Current 5th District Congressman Bob Good is going to be on with us. We've invited John Pudner from Take Back Our Nation. I know it's takeback.org, but he is very well familiar with what's going on in Georgia with this case and this chase over these attorneys general. Who knows who else could stop by, but don't forget the email, jtinthemorningradio@gmail.com or 434-882-4217. To my wife, I love you. To my mother-in-law, I love you too, but I know you only heard. But if I was there, I'd give you a big hug as well. And for you, yes, you, so long, and thanks for all the fish.